Well, just a little late in getting cracking today. I purchased a little bracket to try and make sure that the camera was steady, and it's a delightful thing, but I hadn't had time to find out exactly how to use it, so here we go without. But anyway, welcome to Mirador Television, Hard-Boiled Egg. We cover Battle to Brighton, and we try to cover things that have happened during the day. For those of you who don't know Lewes, that's supposedly the steepest street in the United Kingdom, although some people actually challenge that concept. But it is me on a horse, or apparently on a horse, with the trickery of modern technology. Believe me, I did not ride a horse up Keir Street, but the Prince Regent, later King George IV, who spent a lot of time in Lewes, did, according to many sources, drive a coach and four down there for a bet. Must have, King George IV became King George IV, so he must have won the wager. He didn't break his neck, and so legend was born. But one thing that he did do, and we know, is that he spent a lot of time at Lewes Racecourse, which sadly is now not in existence. Although if you go up there are still many signs of it. The old grandstand has been turned into houses. There are still stables up there. There's still a gallops. All in all, it's rather interesting, and I rather think that perhaps, even though there have been lots of efforts to try to get something going there again, I rather think that it might take a little bit longer before it is used. But really, it could restore itself to some sort of form of glory, even if it was only 1 day a year or 2 days a year, or a weekend of sprint racing or whatever. I suppose that lots of people would have to agree it's not as simple as that, but the concept is good. And the Prince Regent, the interesting thing about the Prince Regent, incidentally, is that his son, once he became King George IV, his son, Augustus Frederick, or Frederick Augustus, I can never remember which, was the first Duke of Sussex. And upon his death, the title lapsed. 175 years later, who is the Duke of Sussex? But Prince Harry. So actually, the ties to Lewes are very, very strong, because as the Prince Regent, he really sowed his wild oats. But the interesting thing is that he used to go to the racecourse, and apparently, why don't we just have a little look at a horse? If it is on me, and in most unlikely circumstance, he would go up to the races, and he would draw crowds of 10 or 15,000 people, because they all wanted to see royalty. And is there so much different, really, between him, although he wasn't the Duke of Sussex, it was his son that was the Duke of Sussex, but was there any difference, really, between him and Harry? Because wherever Harry goes, thousands want to see him. And so the pull of royalty in those days, and we're talking about the 1700s, is just as strong it's as strong then as it is now. So we've got the Duke of Sussex. It's about time that he came to Lewes. It's about time we offered him a coach and four and said, drive it down there, Your Royal Highness. Knowing Harry, he probably would, although he'd probably prefer a tank. Less chance of breaking his neck. But that's Keir Street there, and that's what that's all about. It is an interesting, because it's very, very ancient and cobbled road, and some delightful houses on either side of it. But halfway down, there is a little plaque, because it was one of, the little house, and it is only a little house, was one of Lewes's 65 pubs. Now, I keep on increasing it. I think the figure actually is 63, but 65 sounds better. And there are some people that have pitched it at 70. In the mid-1800s, Lewes had let's be my accurate figure of 63, 65, 70 pubs. And they had between 15 and 17 breweries, depending upon who you want to listen to. I always say 17. Now they've got less than 16 pubs, I think, because a couple have closed very recently. Whether they're going to reopen or not, who knows? But it seems to be the trend of pubs are closing, and it's very sad and very unfortunate. But it had 17 breweries. Now we've got one very famous Harvey's, magnificent brewery, magnificent family running it, very much part of the community, look after the community, and we're lucky that they the survivor, if you like. But there is still evidence. The Star Brewery at the top of the town. It now houses small industries, artistic industries like potters and that sort of thing. So there is evidence of the breweries around town still. And if you actually go on a search, you can find some of the pubs. And halfway down Keir Street, there's a little house that was a pub. And you had its doors open, people would go in. It was more or less almost just into a sitting room. And a very interesting a little pub it must have been. Why did they disappear? Well, actually, the reason is more in why we had 63 pubs. There were only 9,000 population. And Lewes wasn't known as a particularly drunken town, although it was a port. Enough said on that. But it appears that the water was almost undrinkable. The water was killing people. It was so bad. So people had to go to the pubs, including the children. Now, the beer wasn't anywhere near as strong as it is today, but they actually would go along and they would have a mild form of ale or beer, and the families would all go together. Now, that was partly because of the water, and I'm happy to say that if you go down and you talk to Miles Jenner, who is the chief brewer at Harvey's, he'll very proudly demonstrate to you that Lewes Harvey's still has Lewes's deep spring, that it's a spring of pure water that they're able to bring to the surface and make their beer with. So people drinking beer were getting it made out of pure water and not the water that killed. So that was partly why there were 63, 65, 70 pubs. But the other reason is that that the houses in the 18th and 19th century weren't terribly well sealed. In other words, they were chilly in the winter. Oh, wouldn't they have loved a summer like this? And I'm sure they had some. But they let in the wind and so on and so forth. So people found staying at home, particularly since there was no television, they found staying at home rather difficult because it was cold. You either pile into bed, I suppose, or put rugs around you, or whatever, or try to stoke up the fire as much as you can, but the homes were uncomfortable. Which is rather sad, because not too far away, at Fishbourne, which is near Chichester, let's say 50 miles away from Lewes, there is a Roman villa. And quite clearly it showed how the Romans used water, hot water, a form, I suppose, of heating that we use today, but it got lost somehow between the time that the Romans left and very late on in the 19th century and only in the beginning of the 20th century to heat buildings and even later to heat homes. Somehow that art, that skill got lost, and the houses were pretty damn miserable to be in. That's in the main. So where did you go? Well, you went down to the pub, and even if it was only body heat and a couple of pints of beer, you stayed warm. So that's part of the reason that there were 63, 65, 70 pubs in Lewes at that time, and God bless them, they served a real social purpose. And of course they started to disappear, partly as the water got better, partly because of social change, as indeed is happening right now, although I don't totally understand the social change. I like a cup of coffee as much as the best person, but I really don't find them the same sort of bon vivant, convivial places that I find a pub when I walk in. But there we are. That's the way it is, I suppose. You can't change social mores, social trends. Well, you can try. but at the moment, people very much going to coffee shops and not pubs. Having said that, coffee had its nose put out of joint 50 or 60 years ago because every place that you went to was a tea shop. I'm sure some people can remember the tea shop. You went in and you had a pot of tea, and you had scones, and you had Devon cream, and real butter, and it got all around your mouth, and so on and so forth. Oh, if you really want a good description of that sort of thing, is read Wind in the Willows. There are some things that I never tire of telling you to do or suggesting to you to do, and one is read Wind in the Willows. If you've never read Wind in the Willows, you've missed the best book in the world ever written in any language. Wind in the Willows, superb. And there are many copies of it. There's some illustrated, there's some straight read, and there have been some sequels from Wind in the Willows. Okay, not as good as the original. Wind in the Willows, go get it, and then you'll know what I'm talking about when you talk about tea and scones. Anyway, I've been rabbiting on for 12 minutes. I'm only going to take another a couple because perhaps a little history reminiscing isn't too bad when we talk about the Prince Regent, and we talk about the racecourse, and we talk about our new Duke of Sussex. It all wraps up to being very interesting for Lewis, but since we're from Battle to Brighton, I hope that in the next couple of weeks we're going to expand our coverage so that we'll be getting similar sort of stuff that you get from me from people in Newhaven and in Battle. And hopefully then starting from Hastings to Seaford and Eastbourne and so on. And that way we can all stay in touch, we can link the towns, and it is my big hope, and I'm working with our American cousins on this, that we can then start some links with Lewes, Delaware, Newhaven, Connecticut, and the other towns that have the same name as we do, so that we can see what life is like there. What are their concerns? What are their worries? Because I keep on saying, until I'm hoarse, until you're fed up with me saying it, and that is, I don't want local television to become parochial television. I've been having a real poke at the Lewes Council the last few weeks. I'm beginning to find out more and more and more. So if you join me at 5:45 in the morning, 5:45 is dreadful. It's 5:45 indeed. But that's there on Facebook for most of the day, and eventually will be on our own site. So you can tap in and you can see what we talked about. And I'm grateful that not many people joined me at 5:45. But by the time I got home this morning, which was about 7 o'clock, I got about 500 people who had taken a look. And I'm grateful that you did. You may only tap in for a minute or 2 minutes or whatever. But, some days I'll be talking about things that intrigue you, some days not. But the one thing I can assure you is that we are, what local media should be, is a watchdog against the local administrations, the Lewes and the district council, and to some extent the county council. So do be careful that you don't miss some of the things we say, because we are trying to represent your fears, your worries, your concerns, your problems as best we can, and perhaps try to marshal some support to get some of them resolved. And we have talked to some councillors, and some councillors are as concerned as we are. The staff, the lower staff at Lewes District Council are appalled with what's happening there, and most of it, I think, is because of this, to me, silly notion of joining Eastbourne and Lewes. Nothing against Eastbourne, love it. Some terrific restaurants there. It's a lovely day out for me, and I'm sure that people who live there say, "Is that all it is to you, Keith?" No, it's part of Mirador country. I want us to feel that we all have got equal concerns from Battle to Brighton. But joining the two administrations has been a disaster, and I suspect it's going to continue to be a disaster until somebody has got the bottle to admit that it was a mistake and to change it all back again. And I suppose we'll get the same sort of problems. Anyway, 14 minutes and 19 seconds. Haven't got long to go. The heat wave is causing all sorts of problems. Trains are slowing down because they're afraid of the buckles may appear in the rail. And I don't mind that. I like to feel safe, because when they whistle down that stretch, particularly from Wivelsfield to Lewis, and that they don't stop at Plumpton and they don't stop at Cooksbridge, that's a fair old speed. And I would hate to think that a rail buckled and a train came off there. So I'm glad that they're being cautious. Sun Cream, the people who make Sun Cream are offering overtime to their workers. Argos are running out of fans. We're readjusting, aren't we? The downside is that yesterday was the last day of Parliament, and as usual, the government managed to rush out a few things that they hope that we won't notice until they actually impact upon us, and it's too late to do anything about it. But there are a couple of things there. One is selling the Red Arrows. They want to sell the Red Arrows acrobatic team. Oh, Eastbourne, I'm quite sure that you'll be very upset at that, because you have such a magnificent air show. I'm not suggesting that the Red Arrows will be any different, even if they were privatised, but presumably you're going to have to shell out a few more bob to get them there. How silly is that? It's like selling the Test team, isn't it? Or like selling the rugby team, or even selling the English team, although, the cost of football has just gone out of all proportion. It's all daft. And I suppose that will correct itself. I believe that football is like a South Sea bubble. It's going to keep on with these silly transfer fees, these silly money exchanges between millionaires, until in the end somebody's going to turn around and call in the debt. And that's, I think, Chelsea is probably facing with Abramovich, as the Russians will say, Abramovich, who is getting a bit fed up with it. And I think they owe him about 90 million or so. So if he decides to walk away with that, I don't know what's going to happen to the club, but it could be that those sort of things are going to happen right across the football. So I think we just have to keep an eye on that. Anyway, here we go. I'm running way over my time, so I'll tell you what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go and have a nice glass of wine. I'm going to enjoy a little bit of the sun before I come back and face the rigours of being a small business. And believe me, if you think that life is difficult just as an individual, as a small business, it is tough today, because computers do not recognise whether you're big or little. And if they have a cut-off point for payments, that's it. They don't ask who you are. There's no bank manager anymore to say, yes, I know all about you. We'll give you another couple of hours or a couple of days or whatever. Oh, no, sir. The computer has spoken, and that's it. I have to fight those, like most small businesses. I have to fight those. I have to start to take Mirador onto its next level. And in between, I have to try and make some programs. Anyway, this is our lunchtime hard-boiled egg, trying to face some of the rigours of the day, perhaps try to bring a smile to your face when we talk about a little bit of history and so on and so forth. But anyway, there we go. Mirador Television, Battle to Brighton. We are growing slowly, but we're growing, and we hope that we're bringing something to the community that it didn't have before, and which many communities up and down the country are bemoaning, because small local newspapers are disappearing. All right, I'll see you in the morning at 5:45 with Break an Egg. Toodle pip.